What if I told you New York City has more secrets than most countries have history? A ghost subway station untouched for 80 years. More rats than people. Forgotten islands, bizarre laws, and hidden tunnels most New Yorkers don't even know exist. Today, we're going deep. Fact 1. Beneath City Hall, one of the most heavily guarded areas in Manhattan, there is a ghost subway station. The City Hall station opened in 1904 as part of the very first New York City subway line. It was gorgeous. Arched ceilings, skylights, beautiful tiles, elegant curves. It looked more like a European cathedral than a train stop. But as the city grew, the platform became too short for longer trains. So in 1945, the MTA just closed it, sealed it up, left it there. Today, the station still exists, perfectly preserved underground like a time capsule from 1904. Next time you're on the 6 train and it loops past the last stop, you're literally circling the ghost station. You can catch a glimpse through the windows if you stay on board. Fact 2. New York City is home to more than 800 languages. 800. Linguists have called it the most linguistically diverse city in the entire history of human civilization. Nowhere, not London, not Tokyo, not any ancient trade city, has ever had this many languages spoken within its borders at one time. You can walk one block in Queens and hear Mandarin, Bengali, Spanish, Tagalog, Haitian Creole, and Wolof simultaneously. New York isn't just a melting pot, it's a linguistic universe. Fact 3. New York City's economy is so massive that if it were its own country, it would be the 8th or 9th largest in the entire world, competing with Canada, Brazil, and South Korea. Not a state, one city, 5 boroughs. 8.5 million people generated so much economic activity they could show up to the G20 and hold their own. The financial district alone processes trillions of dollars in transactions every single day. This isn't just the city that never sleeps, it's the city that never stops printing. Fact 4. New York has its own abandoned island, and most New Yorkers have no idea it exists. North Brother Island sits in the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island, completely off limits since 1963. In the late 1800s, it was home to Riverside Hospital, where the city quarantined people with contagious diseases. This is where Typhoid Mary Mallon, was held for nearly 30 years without ever being convicted of a crime. After World War II, it briefly became a rehab facility, then a center for teenage drug addicts with reportedly horrific conditions. Then everyone left. Nature took over. Today, trees grow through the hospital floors, vines cover the brick walls, and deer somehow made it onto the island. It looks like a post-apocalyptic video game, sitting right there in the middle of the river, completely swallowed by wilderness. Fact 5. The Statue of Liberty was not originally green. When it was unveiled in 1886, it was a shiny reddish-brown because it's copper, just like a new penny. The iconic blue-green patina developed over 20 to 30 years of oxidation. In the early 1900s, there were serious discussions about painting it back to its original color, but the U.S. Navy vetoed the idea. They argued the green made it a better navigational landmark. So the most recognizable statue in the world got its look from chemistry and a Naval Committee decision. Fact 6. New York's rat problem is not a problem, it's a civilization. The city declared a rat emergency in 2023 and hired its first ever rat czar, an actual government official whose sole job is to fight rats. Estimates put the population anywhere from 3 million to 8 million. The human population is 8.3 million. There may be nearly 1 rat per New Yorker. Rat tunnels run dozens of feet beneath sidewalks. Underground colonies thrive beneath restaurant districts, and the rats are large enough to drag full pizza slices down subway stairs. If you haven't seen Pizza Rat yet, stop everything and go watch it. It is peak New York energy. Fact 7. Central Park is entirely man-made. Before construction began in 1858, the area was a swamp of pig farms, bone-boiling operations, and a community of over 1,600 people. mostly poor Irish, German, and black residents who were forcibly displaced. Landscape architects Olmsted and Vos spent 15 years directing 20,000 workers, moving 10 million cartloads of stone and soil, planting 270,000 trees and shrubs, and designing every single vista and pathway. What looks like natural wilderness is one of the greatest works of landscape art in human history, hiding in plain sight as a park. Fact 8. There's a neighborhood in Manhattan that is geographically located in the Bronx. Marble Hill was cut off from the rest of Manhattan in 1895 when a new shipping channel was dug through the island. Then the original channel was filled in, physically attaching Marble Hill to the Bronx mainland. But legally, it's still part of the borough of Manhattan. Marble Hill residents live on land connected to the Bronx, use Bronx zip codes, but are governed as Manhattan. It exists in a permanent bureaucratic limbo that nobody has ever fully resolved. Fact 9. The Empire State Building has its own zip code, 10118, just for the building. Over 1,000 companies operate inside it, so the Postal Service gave it its own code as the only practical solution. The building also has its own power substation, police department, fire response team, and at peak capacity houses around 15,000 workers per day. It is, in every meaningful sense, a vertical city inside a city. Fact 10. New York City was nearly completely bankrupt in 1975. Decades of debt, urban decline, and financial mismanagement left the city literally unable to pay its bills. Banks refused to lend. President Gerald Ford initially refused federal help, inspiring the legendary Daily News headline, "Ford to City, Drop Dead." He never actually said those words, but close enough. The city was saved at the last minute by pension fund investments and brutal austerity cuts. For about 24 hours in October 1975, the biggest city in America technically couldn't make payroll. Fact 11. The New York City subway never closes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Not for Christmas, not for New Year's, not for blizzards. It has 472 stations, more than any other metro system on Earth, covering 245 miles of routes. It is simultaneously one of the greatest engineering achievements in urban history, and a system legendary for its delays, mysterious smells, and rodent co-tenants. New Yorkers complain about it constantly and would never trade it for anything. Fact 12. Brooklyn was once the fourth largest city in the United States, as its own independent city. Before the Great Consolidation of 1898, Brooklyn had its own mayor, its own government, its own identity. When the vote to merge with New York City was held, Brooklyn residents were bitterly divided, and the measure barely passed. To this day, Brooklyn on its own would still be the fourth largest city in America. It has never fully gotten over giving that up. Fact 13. New York has a bagel tax. In New York State, a whole uncut bagel is an untaxed grocery item, but the moment it's sliced, toasted, or receives any preparation, cream cheese, butter, anything, it legally becomes a restaurant-type food, subject to sales tax. The exact same bagel, cut or uncut, is a different legal product. This has generated actual litigation. Bagel shops have been audited over it. The Department of Taxation and Finance has issued formal guidance on it. The bagel tax is real, it is petty, and it is peak New York governance. Fact 14. The Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is the largest art museum in the Western Hemisphere, with a permanent collection of over 1.5 million objects. Spend 30 seconds on each one, and you'd need over 14 years, non-stop. For decades, admission was pay what you wish. Technically, you could walk into one of the greatest museums on Earth and pay a nickel. That policy changed for out-of-state visitors in 2018, but New York State residents and students can still pay whatever they want. No institution of remotely comparable scale operates that way. Fact 15. The Flatiron Building is a 22-story skyscraper with a tip that is just 6.5 feet wide. Built in 1902 at the convergence of Broadway and Fifth Avenue, it was one of the tallest buildings in the world when completed and the first steel skeleton skyscraper in New York City. People were so convinced it would collapse in strong winds that crowds gathered to watch it fall. It never did. Today, it's one of the most photographed buildings on Earth. You could almost high-five someone standing on the other side of its narrowest point. Fact 16. The Hudson River isn't a river. It's technically an estuary, a tidal inlet where fresh water from upstate mixes with salt water from the Atlantic. Below the federal dam at Troy, the Hudson is tidal, which means the water actually flows in both directions depending on the tide. Twice a day, it reverses. The Lenape people understood this and called it Muhikentuck, the river that flows both ways. Oceanographically, it's a fjord. New York's defining geographic feature has been mislabeled for 400 years. Fact 17. Rikers Island, New York's notorious jail complex, is built entirely on garbage. In the 1930s, the city expanded the island from 87 acres to over 400 acres by dumping millions of tons of ash and refuse into the surrounding water. The land you see today is layer upon layer of old trash. That trash constantly produces methane gas, and the jail complex maintains an active venting system to prevent explosions. One of the most infamous jails in the world is literally sitting on a pile of garbage that is slowly generating flammable gas from below. There are layers of metaphor here I'm not even going to touch. Fact 18. New York has a Victorian-era steam network still running under Midtown Manhattan. The largest district steam system in the world, over 100 miles of pipes, first installed in 1882, delivers heat directly to thousands of buildings, hospitals, and apartment complexes. Those iconic plumes of steam rising from manhole covers? That's the system. Some of those pipes have been in the ground for over 130 years, and they're still operational today. Under the financial capital of the world, a 19th century steam network is quietly keeping the lights on. Fact 19. The New York Public Library's main branch on Fifth Avenue was built on the site of a demolished reservoir. The Croton Distributing Reservoir held millions of gallons of the city's water supply in the 1800s. When it was torn down, the city built one of the most beautiful Beaux-Arts buildings in America directly in its place. And beneath that building, miles of underground stacks and tunnels, plus a book delivery system using pneumatic tubes and conveyor belts, some dating back to 1911, that still transport materials between floors today. Fact 20. Nobody knows where Hell's Kitchen got its name. One story says a 19th century cop watching a riot said the neighborhood was hotter than hell. Another credits a specific tenement building, so overcrowded and crime-ridden the name spread to the whole area. Whatever the origin, Hell's Kitchen was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America for most of the 20th century, the real-life backdrop for the gang wars that inspired West Side Story. City planners eventually renamed it Clinton to improve its image. New Yorkers refuse to use that name. It will always be Hell's Kitchen. Fact 21. When the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world by nearly double the previous record. People were so skeptical it was safe that a crowd panic just days after opening triggered a stampede that killed 12 people, sparked by a rumor that the bridge was collapsing. To prove it could hold, P.T. Barnum marched 21 elephants across it in 1884. It held. It's now 140 years old, and structural engineers say it was so overbuilt that it can theoretically handle many times its original design load. Built to last, and it has. Fact 22. Wall Street is literally named after a wall. In the 1600s, Dutch settlers in New Amsterdam built a wooden defensive wall along the northern edge of their territory to guard against British attacks. The path that ran alongside it became Wall Street. The wall was torn down in 1699. The street stayed. Over the next few centuries, it became the financial nerve center of the most powerful economy in history. A 17th century wooden fence is now the most famous address in global finance. Fact 23. New York City has more museums than any other city in the world, over 100. Beyond the obvious landmarks like the Met, MoMA, and the Natural History Museum, there's a museum of transit, a museum of math, a museum of sex, a museum of failure, a merchant marine museum on Staten Island, and a museum dedicated to the full history of New York City. You could visit a different museum every single day of the year and still not see them all. Fact 24. Times Square used to be called Longacre Square and was the center of New York's carriage-making industry. When the automobile killed that industry, the neighborhood collapsed, then transformed into the entertainment district it became in the early 1900s. It was renamed Times Square in 1904 when the New York Times moved its headquarters there and celebrated with a fireworks show. That tradition eventually became the ball drop, which has happened every year since 1907, except 1942 and 1943, when wartime blackout regulations forced a cancellation. Both years, a moment of silence was held at midnight instead. Fact 25. Manhattan was purchased from the Lenape people in 1626 for goods valued at 60 Dutch guilders, famously simplified to the legend of $24 worth of beads. Whether both parties understood that transaction the same way is deeply disputed by historians. What isn't disputed is that the Lenape had inhabited the entire New York region for thousands of years before European contact. Their descendants are today federally recognized as nations in Oklahoma and Wisconsin, but Lenape cultural organizations remain active in the New York area, preserving their language and history in the city their ancestors called home. Fact 26. Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island, within the New York metro area, is one of the most important particle physics research facilities in the world. Multiple Nobel Prize-winning particles were first detected there, including the discovery of usable antimatter. The lab continues active research today. New York isn't just a financial and cultural capital. It is one of the foremost centers of particle physics on Earth. Fact 27. The High Line, one of the most celebrated urban parks in the world, was almost demolished. The elevated freight rail line through Chelsea was built in the 1930s to get trains off Death Avenue, a stretch of 10th Avenue so deadly from street-level rail accidents it earned the name. The last train ran in 1980. For 2 decades, the structure rusted and the city debated tearing it down. Local advocates fought for years to save it. They won in 1999. The High Line opened as a park in 2009 and has since generated over $12 billion in surrounding real estate development. It's now studied in urban planning programs worldwide as a masterclass in adaptive reuse. Fact 28. 432 Park Avenue, one of the tallest residential buildings in the Western Hemisphere at 1,396 feet, is largely empty. Its ultra-luxury apartments sold for $7 million to over $80 million, but a large percentage sit vacant year-round. Their owners, many of them international billionaires, treat them as investment assets or occasional stopovers, visiting for a few weeks per year at most. Meanwhile, New York City is in one of the worst housing affordability crises in its history. A tower full of empty $30 million apartments stands over a city where hundreds of thousands of people can't make rent. Fact 29. New York City passed a law in 1867 making it illegal to bury horses within city limits because the city had an absolutely catastrophic horse carcass problem. By the 1880s, over 100,000 horses lived and worked in New York. In 1880 alone, 15,000 dead horses were removed from city streets. In summer, the bodies would bloat in the heat and sometimes explode. Sanitation workers sometimes had to wait for a carcass to partially decompose before it could be cut up and removed because an intact horse was too large for the carts. New York in the 19th century was many things. One of them was completely buried in dead horses. Fact 30. The Bronx is the only borough physically connected to the mainland United States. Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island are all on islands. The Bronx shares a land border with Westchester County and the North American continent. It's named after Jonas Bronck, a Swedish sea captain and one of the first European settlers in the area in the 1630s. It's also one of the only places in the country with a permanent definite article in its name. You don't go to Bronx, you go to the Bronx. Nobody knows exactly why. It just is. Fact 31. New York City invented the egg cream, a drink that contains neither eggs nor cream. It's chocolate syrup, milk, and seltzer water, and it is ferociously associated with New York Jewish deli culture. The most commonly cited inventor is candy shop owner Louis Oster of the Lower East Side, who allegedly created it in the late 1800s. At peak popularity, he was reportedly selling 3,000 a day. The name may come from a Yiddish phrase meaning pure sustenance, or it may just be a corruption of an old French term. Nobody agrees. The drink is perfect. Nobody outside New York fully understands it. Fact 32. Times Square is the most visited tourist destination on Earth. Over 50 million people per year, more than the Eiffel Tower, the Great Wall, and Disneyland. On New Year's Eve, over 1 billion people watched the ball drop on television, making it arguably the single most watched event in human history. Every year, from a few blocks of Midtown Manhattan, Times Square is simultaneously beloved and mocked, tacky and transcendent, overwhelming and impossible to ignore. It is New York concentrated into a few square blocks. Fact 33. New York City has recorded 578 distinct bird species across its 5 boroughs, more than 2/3 of all bird species found anywhere in North America. The city sits directly on the Atlantic Flyway, a major migration route, and Central Park alone can see over 100 species in a single day during migration season. There's a famous red-tailed hawk named Pale Male who has nested on a Fifth Avenue luxury apartment building since the 1990s. His story has been the subject of documentaries, legal battles with the Co-op Board, and a New Yorker feature. Pale Male is, in many ways, the ultimate New Yorker, stubborn, resilient, and completely unwilling to leave prime Manhattan real estate. Fact 34. The Brooklyn Bridge's construction killed its own engineering family. Chief engineer John Roebling was injured on the job and died of tetanus before construction finished. His son Washington took over and suffered severe decompression sickness from working in the underwater foundations, leaving him largely paralyzed. Washington's wife Emily spent the next 11 years teaching herself engineering and overseeing daily construction on his behalf. She was the first person to cross the completed bridge. One of the greatest engineering achievements in history was finished by a woman who had to learn the profession mid-project just to save it. Fact 35. And finally, the most New York fact of all. New York City has been destroyed on film more than any other city in history. Flooded, frozen, exploded, overrun by monsters. The Day After Tomorrow, Godzilla, Cloverfield, Independence Day, I Am Legend, Escape from New York, Avengers. There is actual academic research studying why we keep doing this, why we need to imagine destroying New York. Some say it's because the city represents modernity itself, and leveling it is how we process our anxieties about civilization. Some say it's because no skyline is more instantly recognizable, and nothing sells a disaster movie like watching the Empire State Building fall. Whatever the reason, New York endures. In real life and on screen, it always gets rebuilt, because that's what New York does. It is too big, too loud, too alive, and too stubborn to stop. And that might be the most insane fact of all. 35 facts. And we barely scratched the surface. New York City is 400 years of history, 800 languages, 8 million people, and 1 million secrets stacked on top of each other. There is no city like it anywhere on Earth. Drop a comment below with the fact that hit you hardest. I Want to Know. And if you want more deep dives into the cities and hidden histories that shape the world, hit subscribe. We do this every week, and let's keep traveling together.